All right. Hello, folks. We're starting off in the same place we left off in the equalizer video. And we're going to talk about compressors. Compressors are interesting. What a compressor does is it cuts off audio above a certain decibel level, decibel being a measure of how loud something is. And anything that goes above that level, it pushes it back down, compressing the audio. So the difference between the lowest note, like the quietest note, and the highest, like loudest note, is the dynamic range. And what a compressor does is it gets rid of that dynamic range. So what I really want to do is give a good example of what that does. And you can get a good example here just from the Fruity limiter, actually. Because a limiter is just a type of compressor. It makes sure that nothing goes above zero. Like if you're above zero here, it means that you're clipping. It means that the audio waves in your sample or song, their loudest peak goes above the limit. So if it's above the limit, there's a limit, surprisingly enough. But if it goes above the limit, then it will make like a popping sort of sound. It will clip and it'll sound bad, and the whole image of your song gets thrown off. So a limiter just stops anything from going over there, compressing the sound in the process. So if we play this, you hear like every sound is defined on its own. It's all pretty clearly defined. But again, it doesn't feel coherent. It doesn't feel like glued together or anything. But as soon as we hit a Fruity limiter, the difference between the low and the highs is different, It's a much smaller difference. So what we can do is open this up, hit play again, and just kind of mess around in here and see what's happening. So this is the threshold. And this shows which decibel level you don't want anything to go through. And this little curve here shows how much is pushing down the sound to make it stay at this level. Higher the threshold, the less compression there actually is, you see? We're not even touching this now. But we have the gain up. And gain is volume, right? Usually it's around here. Let's say I like it right here, but some people like to push it down to here and like crank gain or something. It doesn't seem to work with the limiter, but it works with the compressor. So gain scale. Gain is basically just the volume of the noise. You just mess around with this until it pops. Like, you feel like it kind of hits a bit harder now. Yeah, this is not really glued together, right? Now it is. So this is a limiter, but there is also a compressor involved too. Limiter and compressor, again, really similar things, slightly different uses. Limiter is mainly used to prevent things from going over zero. A limiter is mainly used to prevent things from going over zero. A compressor is just a general use thing. I'll turn that off for a second. Yeah, again, the compressor will do roughly the same thing with a few special settings that you don't really need to know at the moment, because I'll go over them another time. But yeah, I just want to get over the basic principle of what a compressor does. And then you actually have a whole bunch of different types of compressors that have different specialties. So if we play this again, we're on the master track, right? We're not doing anything specifically. We gotta go into more plugins. This is just how I have it set up now. And density Mark III. So, listen. Very subtle difference. What this does is it glues things together. What gluing things together means just what it says, really. It makes everything like closer together, I guess, more coherent. basically what a compressor should be doing. So this is quite a good compressor here, and it is included with the course. So we can change around the presets here. Good time to get into presets. Pretty much every plugin has presets, and they're really good places to start. You can fiddle around with the controls yourself, but sometimes the presets are just so good and they work so well, might as well use them. And you see that one made it louder. This one, I guess, makes it bigger, which is very useful. We use that in conjunction with Fruity Limiter, which now it's like double compression, right? So we started at this, right? When I listen to that, when I listen to this, I kind of feel frustrated because it just doesn't sound right. It's frustrating for some reason. But when we have it all compressed and glued together here, it hits way harder and is way more satisfying, right? Instead of the kick drum just being a little peak, you know. It slams a little bit, but not much, like this. It goes from that to this. Smacking you in the face, right? Compressors are extremely useful for that. And you can actually compress individual tracks as well. Again, just kind of, we can just go to basic Fruity Compressor, if I can find it. It's all just in this one not organized list right now. All right, Fruity Compressor, very basic compressor. You got gain, you got ratio, and threshold. So ratio. So I won't get into the technical things about ratio, but this controls how compressed the sound is going to be. It's the ratio of compression. The higher up you turn it, the more things get really squashed down to the threshold. Right now the threshold's at 0.0 dB, so it's acting as a limiter. So it doesn't let anything go over 0.0 dB. But you certainly can lower it. And in fact, most limiters do go down about -1 dB, because even with all the settings in the world, some peaks are going to get through and clip. So, and clipping is, I do believe I explained it, but it's when there's a wave. So there's like a peak in the wave. Watch my mouse here. See that? That's a wave, right? So let's say this bottom of this compressor here is the limit. So if we have a wave that doesn't go up to the limit, right, goes below it, we get to hear the entire wave, right? But if we have a wave that's so loud it goes over the limit, it gets cut off here, sails along to where it's supposed to come down just in a straight line, and then comes down. And then every time it does that, it hits, and it just makes this straight line. And when the wave is transformed to this straight line here, it just sounds bad. It kind of clicks or it distorts, and yeah, it ruins mixes. It's the thing you really, really want to avoid. And it's not something that you hear in really good mixes. Unless they're Metallica. Don't tell anyone I said that. Man, Death Magnetic is famous for being really awfully mixed and mastered, clipping everywhere. It's an embarrassment. Really, anything that clips, it's an embarrassment, you know? You want to avoid clipping at all costs. But anyway, let's keep playing this and let's see what this compressor I just used did. So we'll start with it off, and I don't know what it's going to do. I just messed around with the settings, right? All of this has to be kind of done by ear. We have an 8.8:1 ratio, which is pretty high. You got thresholds, negative 1.4 dB. I don't know. That's not really going to do much. Maybe we should like make it like a 10, -10. Yeah, around there. Whatevs. Gain, this is gain correction. If everything starts getting quiet because your threshold is too low, you correct the gain by around how much the threshold is, you know. So if it's 10 decibels, you might raise it to 9. But it all depends on if you feel you need it or not. But anyway, oh yeah, attack. It's how much the peak kind of... This controls when the compressor actually starts after the peak goes up. So let's say peak goes up, it's loud. right? And then after 15 milliseconds of the peak, it slams down and it compresses it, right? So it gives an attack. It gives a bit of pop to the sound, right? Bam! And then release is when the compressor stops compressing, right? So it lets the music go back to normal, right? It lets it be what it wants to be. That's what release does. So if you have a long release, it's just going to be compressed consistently until it finally releases. There's uses for it, but you just find the right balance. 200 is fine, 15 is fine, all this is fine. The type, it's just the kind of audio characteristic of the sound, right? So this is hard, and then you have medium, vintage, soft, and whatever around this. So it's not like an unnumbered wheel or anything, it's just features.